Joseph is here from the back door of the Metaverse.
How you doing, man?
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
So, Joseph, I was just presenting you. Yeah.
Hello, buddy.
I was just presenting you a little bit that you have been in the industry, but also in the industry of real-time visuals, immersive experience for way before the Metaverse, or the buzzword Metaverse. And then COVID happened, and well, the live industry, the live shows, concerts stopped functioning basically, and it was kind of a natural progression to move into this. And now that you're here, I would love to know the story about Joe and Astral Project, and where does it come from, and how do you get into these buzzy words of Metaverse?
Okay, thank you. Astral Project was formed about 10 years ago after a career in music. And we specifically were looking at the eyes, the highest bandwidth input we can get into our brains. We were working in music, and I was like, actually, we want to refocus on visuals and immersive visuals. And through that, we started working with games engines such as Unreal, Unity, and all Touch Designer and things like that. And over the course of the journey, we ended up creating these virtual experiences through projection mapping. So that was our sort of input into this world. Projection mapping being the projection of media content upon buildings and augmenting our realities through animated media being projected onto buildings. And that led us into a variety of different projects, from Sydney Opera House, projection mapping the Sydney Opera House, generating the first immersive experience at Burning Man Festival, and really diving deeper into how we can change our environments and augment our worlds using these games engines. And then COVID happened, and obviously a lot of the business and the events and the public shows that we were working on disappeared, and we refocused our energies onto actually through Burning Man. The theme of Burning Man that year was Metaverse, and we proposed a project with them about creating a virtual world for Burning Man, where all the members of Burning Man could enter and join in. And then that exploded out into a variety of different projects called Sparkleverse and iBurn and different things like that. And that really gave us the first insight in sort of 2019 about where this was going. And then obviously the money started pouring into the world, and everyone started to sort of go through this arms race of generating these sorts of platforms for different uses. So yeah, we've been lucky enough to be kind of right place at the right time on this.
Thank you for sharing. Básicamente lo que ha dicho Joe es que bueno, ellos ya hacían experiencias de video mapping, ¿no? De proyecciones con mapping, donde bueno, pues ya estaban en contacto con esas tecnologías, y luego vino COVID, y a través de hecho Burning Man, que para quien no lo conozca es un festival, iba a decir de música, pero no es de música, es básicamente un festival con una cultura muy grande, se hace en el desierto de Nevada de Estados Unidos, donde el tema era el Metaverse. Y de hecho duró un año, que no se hizo en presencial, sino que se hizo en el metaverso con conciertos y tal. Y bueno, pues a partir de ahí ellos participaron y empezaron a tener una serie de propuestas de proyectos. Luego empezó a fluir el dinero hacia el metaverso, y ahí empezó un poco la carrera de la rata, o de una manera muchas agencias, muchos estudios haciendo contenido en el sector. Y así un poco fue como how everything started for you and Astral into this realm. Joe, what's the Metaverse?
Well, I don't think anyone in this room can actually answer that question, and if they do, they're talking absolute bollocks. At the moment, you know, if we look back, you know, Neil Stephenson book, you know, The Lawnmower Man, The Origins of VR. Back in the 90s, it was this idea that we had a virtual overlay over our world and we could interact with other people virtually. So that idea has expanded out and gone off in all directions, from the rise of blockchain and Web3, NFT, interaction, exchanging, the maturity of the games industry, which is now the biggest industry, one of the biggest industries in the world. It's bigger than the movie industry. and the idea of creating virtual worlds that people can go into and interact in, and generate different personas or different avatars. I mean, it's already been existing for many years through the like of Second Life. I don't know if any of you guys know Second Life, but this is basically exactly what everyone's trying to create at the moment. It's been happening for 10 years. There's 30,000 concurrent users in there right now, today, compared to something like Decentraland, which has got, I don't know, I think the report came out a few days ago, there's 36 people in Decentraland. So we're witnessing, you know, an industrial revolution. This is the fourth industrial revolution. It's being driven through technology and the ability to have high-powered GPU, pixel delivery, and where it's going to go. In my imagination, I think it's not going to be confined by VR or AR or the way in which we imagine this world to be accessed. I think we'll start to see buildings and architecture changing. I think we'll start to immerse ourselves in media through a collective experience rather than insular solo experience. I actually think VR itself is kind of on a limited time band with regards to how it will be used, especially, you know, if we look at Meta and the kind of launch of the Quest sort of program of different technologies, the stuff that came out this week with Quest 2. I think it's just not an experience that people all want to jump into. It's a solo, insular experience. It's disconnected from the world around you. So I think when we see games engines starting to overlay over real-world experiences, and we can fuse the two things together in a sort of mixed reality without the hindrance of technology, as in wearing headsets and closing yourselves off to everyone around you, that's where I believe we're heading. Advances in cloud computing and all these sorts of different layers of the ability to deliver those pixels to the people will open up the doors for those change elements to take place.
So what do you think is the biggest challenge for that? Cloud computing, like internet speed?
Yeah, well, ultimately the metaverse is delivered via the internet, right? So the streaming of pixels out to different users. With NVIDIA and what NVIDIA and Epic Games did back in 2019 when they raised to launch the metaverse, and in NVIDIA's world it's called the Omniverse. They are amassing large GPU systems to deliver pixels out, so these massive supercomputers that are being constructed all over the world right now. And with that power, you can access different worlds, different online cloud engines that run these games without the need to have, specific PCs or gaming PCs. So, is that better? Can you hear me now? Is that better? Oh, sorry. Yeah. So, can you remind me of what you were asking me?
Yeah, it's good. Actually, I just wanted to clarify.
Going off piste.
No, it's good. I'm gonna translate. I just wanted to clarify as a real quick point. What do you think were the challenges to go into those social mixed reality experience? And I asked if it was internet connection, if it was more hardware, computer power, graphic power. You have to shake it, apparently.
Hello? There we go.
It works.
I mean, there's multiple challenges, actually, if we look at the social aspect of it. You know, we're already seeing the challenges through social media and how that's affecting people's ability to interact or what they believe to be themselves. And I think that will be one of the biggest challenges we face in the dichotomy of your personality and your persona. We see that in Instagram, of course, you know, this hyper-positive social media platform where people are consistently putting out positive images, and then other people then reference themselves against those images and start to create their own persona that doesn't necessarily fit to the actual life of that person. And when we start to get into this rich, overlaid virtual world experience where people are interacting as themselves or as virtual personalities, then those problems are only going to become exasperated. So I think that's one of the major challenges we have facing us with the launch of all these different metaverse-based systems.
Thank you for saying that. Let me translate a little bit because you said very interesting points. Joe estaba diciendo que le he preguntado qué es el metaverso. Esa ha sido la pregunta. Y ha dicho que, bueno, que en realidad es una pregunta muy grande y que cualquiera que te diga lo que es el metaverso directamente seguramente está diciendo tonterías, ¿no? Porque es difícil de ponerlo dentro. Lo que sí que se puede decir es que, bueno, llevamos tiempo desarrollando una serie de tecnologías que crean mundos virtuales y cada vez, bueno, pues han ido uniendo estos conceptos a estos mundos virtuales inmersivos, los conceptos de blockchain, NFTs, diferentes industrias, como por ejemplo la industria del cine, que es gigante, espacios interactivos virtuales, avatares. Entonces, todo este amalgamiento, ¿no?, de conceptos parece que están dando forma a esto que le llamamos metaverso. Pero de hecho, ya hace mucho tiempo que tenemos una plataforma que se llama Second Life, que está ahí hace más de 10 años, que es exactamente lo que todo el mundo quiere hacer ahora con el metaverso, y eso ya está hecho desde hace 10 años, ¿no? Cuando ves que tiene muchísimos, además, más usuarios que lo que puede tener, por ejemplo, Sandbox ahora mismo. Entonces, dice que es una realidad que estamos ante la cuarta revolución industrial que va a ir guiada por tecnología. Y él también dice que, bueno, pues que realmente la experiencia de adopción del metaverso no va a venir tanto por realidad virtual, realidad totalmente inmersiva, porque eso hace que nos aislemos, que él no ve una realidad donde nos vayamos a una esquina de la habitación, nos pongamos las gafas y estemos solos conectando con gente que está lejos pero dentro de un espacio virtual, sino que ve más una realidad mixta donde podamos hacer, pues, una especie de realidad mixta donde estamos en la realidad con personas, pero a la vez, pues, interactuando con cierta capa virtual, ¿no? Y que, bueno, están los retos de la tecnología. A medida que va avanzando, pues, la capacidad de tarjetas gráficas, GPU, tecnología, se despliega la posibilidad de tener mundos virtuales que sean más interesantes, y además uno de los problemas o de los retos, como decía, va a ser este concepto de identidad, ¿no? En redes sociales tenemos... Yo soy una persona y en redes sociales puedo crear una especie de identidad que realmente no soy yo, pero que pongo ahí fuera como que soy yo, ¿no? Un avatar, una identidad. Y en el momento en que estemos en la vida real compartiendo en una realidad mixta, pueden haber retos y pueden haber un poco crisis de identidad de alguna manera en ese sentido. Hoy hablaremos más sobre identidades digitales con Kai Philippe, pero me parece una muy buena introducción. I really enjoy the way you say that actually, in a way, future is collaboration and not losing that sense of touch, and technology cannot be a barrier for that, but in a way, something that stimulates that in mixed realities. So what are we seeing now, by the way?
So this is the show he produced for Burning Man, which was a 360 games engine. Hello, there we go. A 360 games engine environment at the base of Burning Man in Nevada. It was a massive collaboration in the end. We were doing a project to do with the artificial intelligence singularity, and at the future, artificial intelligence would search back and look for itself. So we created an immersive games environment within the man. And inside the metadata of that game, we put a declaration of benevolent coexistence. So it was a program that could be downloaded by an artificial intelligence system to itself in a ceremonial situation in Burning Man. Yeah, it's quite esoteric. We were expecting time travelers to come back in the future and get us to change the wording of the document. But yeah, if you see any of this stuff on the internet, in the back of that image and that file will contain the metadata contract that was reducted by one of the UN human rights lawyers. So hopefully we got it right.
I love how you could recreate all these kinds of experiences. It's beyond, let's use some virtual framework. It's more about, okay, what's the experience that we want to create and how can we get closer to that in a way?
Yeah, I mean, for us, Astro Project, really, one of our main founding rules in all of this is connected experience, is shared collaborative experience. It's the reason why we've steered away from things like VR specifically, because it basically disconnects you from the people around you. You can sit there on your own, and I mean, we'll talk about meta in a minute, but like, I believe the future is one of a connected reality rather than one of a disconnected reality, and you know, we're working very much towards the latter there, or the first part, the actual connected reality part. And we also use games engines and metaverse-based tools to ideate as well. So we go through process of ideation, and this is just some of the stuff that came off my laptop last night. But we use it to actually explore worlds and build worlds that are hypothetical, that we can then push into architectural development plans, and walk around them and experience them with the people that we're working with on those plans. And also as well, some of the data that goes through those, for example, living systems or underground laboratories, things like this, they can all be run through all these different patches with Unreal Engine. I think you're probably going to pick up that I'm an Unreal Engine fan. I believe these will be some of the people that change the world dramatically. Their mission in their games engine is to be inclusive and collaborative and to create waves of hyper-creation, rather than disconnecting people and making people consumers of content packs. So yeah, our business really looks at the generation of those worlds, the animation of ideas, and how we can explore new ideas and creativity, as well as problem solving. You know, you find problems when you enter into these sorts of virtual experiences.
Yeah, sounds like all the projects you're doing are actually very rooted into the why, or what are we doing with these experiences and where are we going. So from your point of view, how should businesses approach their entrance to the metaverse? Like, I want to make an experience in the metaverse. What's the first thing they should ask themselves, or how to collaborate, or who to collaborate with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's so many different aspects to it. If we look just simply at what Facebook have done in changing their name to Meta, and the capturing of their 3 or so billion people on the planet into these sorts of metaverse-based systems or virtual engines, it's what I believe their goal is to create a group of people that are interacting, working in an enclosed VR experience with reference to the outside world through mixed media, but still the images that are coming to your eyeballs are pixels, and that's it. Whereas I believe in the future, you know, our brain, if you understand frames, our brain runs at 12,000 frames per second. And, you know, if we compare it to what you get from an Oculus, 12,000. Well, that's an estimate as well. You know, they think it could actually be more than that. But currently, you know, this screen, 30 frames per second. This is actually a really interesting project, actually, which is to deal with how we can use wearable technology to understand our own energy fields around our body and how we can generate them. That's for the Tate Gallery in London. So we modeled out the Tate Gallery in London, and we were exploring the data set that can be passed between users using metaverse-based platforms like your heart rate, your temperature, your breathing, and then transform them into real-time graphics. And as well, this is another project that we're working on, which is to do with how you can transform your own space and create virtual windows into the metaverse, so that you're not using devices to access virtual engines. You're actually got them in around you, and it sort of harks back to the work we've done with projection mapping over the past.
Okay, there's a lot of things to unpack here, and I would just make a short summary about what you just said, specifically about the 12,000 frames per second. That really blew my mind, because if we're like, yeah, okay, we're buying screens that are like 60 frames per second, that's amazing. Yeah. We're nowhere closer to actually making an experience that's really immersive.
Yeah, so when you break it down as far as how powerful our brain is, and wearing a VR headset, the latency when you turn your head from left to right or look left to right, that tiny little bit of latency in your mind is massive. That's why when you wear VR systems, you start to feel sick. It kind of burns your brain, because your brain is continuously trying to fight this lag and this latency. So I don't know if you've used VR a lot, but you feel sick, you get like a seasick feeling. And after a while that goes because effectively that part of your brain is being burned by over complicated use, and your brain just goes, actually, this is way too hard to process, let's just move on. So if we can imagine a metaverse platform that delivers 12,000 frames to your eyeballs, and you can have that rich experience without your brain fighting it, and without your brain going through a process of going, this is unnatural, then in the future I will see that this will become a widespread use. Up until that point, especially with the likes of Quest 2 and things like that, the technology is effectively fighting your own brain and how you perceive the world around you. And I think that is also the pitfall of it, because the ability to deliver 12,000 frames through any device or over the internet is practically impossible. So the only way you're going to get there is by overlaying and creating a virtual overlay of the assets that you would find within a game, mixed with the world that you see around you at 12,000 frames per second that your eyes can receive it in.
That definitely means creating a new world. I really enjoy it, because I'm going to translate for a second, but I really enjoy your point of view, because I really think that by creating a metaverse that's actually aligned with reality in terms of bandwidth, in terms of hardware, we really can mix reality. I think there we can really build a place for even us to understand ourselves better and to create our own worlds, and to not get too spiritual, but actually proving ourselves as gods, because that's the space where we're actually proving ourselves as something bigger than us, and even proving that maybe we live in a simulation. But apart from that, me ha gustado mucho lo que has dicho acerca de la integración de la tecnología con nuestra biología. Yo nos decía que aproximadamente se piensa que el cerebro humano funciona a 12.000 frames por segundo. Significa 12.000 unidades, 12.000 imágenes por segundo, y eso es una resolución muy alta. ¿Qué pasa? Que tenemos pantallas que funcionan a 60 frames por segundo, sets de VR, sets de realidad virtual que funcionan muchísimo más lento, y eso es lo que hace que te sientas mareado. Eso es lo que hace que tu cerebro está luchando todo el rato contra la tecnología. ¿Por qué? Porque hay un microsegundo de espera que hace que tu cerebro diga, ¿qué pasa aquí? ¿Qué pasa aquí? ¿Qué pasa aquí? Y eso hace que te acabe dando dolor de cabeza y que no esté alineado. Entonces, si conseguimos realmente, uno, una tecnología que esté alineada con la biología de tu cerebro, y dos, unas experiencias que además sean inmersivas y que realmente tengan sentido para la experiencia que estás haciendo, ahí es cuando realmente podemos empezar a hablar de un metaverso que está ahí para llevar a la humanidad a otro punto, o al menos para realmente hablar de lo que todo el mundo imaginamos como el metaverso cuando pensamos en ciencia ficción, un espacio, un mundo nuevo que estamos creando. Entonces, para poner un poco en contexto, Joe es especialista en la parte tecnológica y gráfica, y es una parte importante del metaverso, porque aparte de la economía, apart from economy, presence and experience, la presencia y la experiencia es muy importante. Así que estamos viendo estos puntos de vista con él que me parecen súper interesantes. Going a bit back to actually users and companies and people who are related to this growth that we're experiencing. Before I ask you, what's the approach that business should have in starting Metaverse's experience, or what kind of contractors, what kind of collaboration should they be looking for experiences? Let's talk about how these experiences can change business proposals. How this technology can change business or proposals, projects.
Well, I think since COVID, we've all seen that, the hindrances of people being able to be in the same room and communicating in the same space at the same time was limited, and therefore we used some of these platforms to overcome those problems, such as Zoom and Google Meet calls and things like that. And our company actually operates in Sydney. I have a studio here myself with the family in Ibiza. We work with 2 people in Montreal, and we work in a kind of a decentralized remote process. Now, the way that metaverse platforms, such as I'll show you in a minute, another one that we're working with, the way that can change businesses and the way in which businesses are operating is it will allow you to have that flow state work environment where I can come and tap you on the shoulder, and instead of organizing a Google meeting, and we all know Google or Zoom meetings, half of the call is taken up by going, "Hi, I'm Joe. Yeah, I'm in Ibiza. Nice to meet you. What's that in the background?" And sort of all these sorts of small talk, time-wasting chat experiences where really I just want to ask that one guy at the table what his plan is for this next stage. So when we look at the time that is saved in those work processes where we can have flow state work processes, that will transform the way in which we work. It already is transforming the way we work, but it will go on to another step where we can have these virtual environments. You can drop in, I know that you're there and you're working with me, but you're in Australia and I'm here in Ibiza. And I don't have to be confined by meetings or set periods of time in which I can talk to you. I can walk up to you and tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, by the way, have you seen this?" Pull up a 3D file of the thing that I'm working on, and then we can jump into it together and explore, augment, change, redesign, and then that's it. That interaction would take 10 minutes. But the amount of those interactions you can have on a daily basis when you have a live flowing work environment, for example, is by a factor of 20 or 30, I think. The other part of it as well is this idea of flow state communication. You get it in a game, people are buddying up and going on different missions, but when we're doing it in a working environment, or let's say even a fan environment or a membership environment where I'm a fan of this band, you're as well, you're making your own music, you can pass me your music and we can work in a collaborative studio, then in walks someone else. All these different possibilities start to kind of be created, and they're flow state, so it means they're happening at light speed compared to the ability for me to make contact with you, book a meeting in, tell you what my plan is. We can enter into these sort of worlds and collaborate really, really quickly and in a rich format too. So as a business and approaching this idea of remote working and working from where your happiest place is and where you feel most comfortable and most productive, we're already seeing now that people aren't going back to offices after COVID. They want to stay in their house with their kids. They feel more productive in those environments. So how you can create virtual worlds that facilitate the human rather than the other way around, where the human has to fit to a set program or a meeting schedule. So as a business, I would suggest that would be one massive area of productivity. Another one is your ability to market products and really immerse people within products. For example, launching a car or a lawnmower or whatever it is that you're selling, inviting people into those worlds, and they can actually use them and not actually use them, but virtually use these tools and see the products up close in a high, rich, shaded environment where it's almost close as you can get to sort of a real experience. And you can go through 50 of those experiences in a day if you're trying to buy a car. You're not going to the store, you're going, and then once you've figured out that you want to buy that BMW, you can jump in a car and go and actually look at it in real life. You've made your decision, you can flow into that. So we're going to see the acceleration of all of these things: work, commerce, creativity. I mean, Metaverse really is a creative revolution. The creators of the world are giving the ability to envision and imagine anything that you can create in a 3D program. So visioning projects is, from my perspective, one of the most important parts. If you can see it, you can make it. And if you can also build it in a 3D engine, you can walk around it and you can feel the experience. You can even simulate airflow data and electrical pathways and work out the actual architecture, engineering. We've done lots of work with Autodesk as well on this in San Francisco, where they're creating virtual engines. So, for example, you want to build a building and you want to say, hey, it needs to have 200 rooms in it. These are my parameters. This is a 3D file. It's got to sit. And then using the engine of the game to analyze the engineering data and work out what's the most efficient way to construct that building while you're standing in there with the other designers. So all this stuff is happening now, but it's confined to native applications upon computers. And I believe when we start to see the fruition of the metaverse, we'll start to see these native applications be lifted up off your computer and into a collaborative environment where you can instantaneously bring people in from different places through web links and go through these processes alongside the power of those engines and those computational devices.
Oh, that's amazing. Actually, what comes to my mind is that we don't realize how much blocked or how much we have some blocks by the environment that we have and by the possibilities that we have. Because going to a place to work in offices is very from the Industrial Revolution, where we have to go somewhere, and that's the best way for us to work. And now we're realizing that no, maybe we work better in the place that most inspire us. But there's problems with that, right? Because we don't have that instantaneous relationship with our co-partners or co-workers. And now we're allowing each other, we're allowing a space where the goodies of both things are available. And even what you say, right? An architect that has to imagine, has to have this spatial imagination, but if they're there, they could really envision that imagination and put themselves there, then maybe their creativity could explode in ways that we cannot imagine. So we're actually enabling new technologies that allow us for more creative output. So I think that's amazing.
So I was going to shake this microphone.
Let me translate.
I'm going to make a cocktail before I speak.
Exactly.
But yeah, we're already seeing this creative explosion. And I mean, if you just look at the stats, the demographic stats that sit below all of this stuff, in 2030, 2/3 of the planet will be gamers. In 2026, the millennial generation will come online and into the workforce, being native at using a lot of these games engines through the computer games that they're all playing right now. And you just look at the traffic on things like Fortnite and all these other games and Minecraft, for example. Now, when you overlay that into a working system environment, this new wave of the millennial generation coming into the workforce will be native with these apps. So it's like you see a kid walking around with a mobile phone, you know, they're going through it and they know how to use it. Whereas you hand that mobile phone to someone who's in their 90s, they may not be able to open it up and get in there. So it's exactly the same sort of model that we're looking at with regards to how we're accessing the metaverse and the programs and the ways in which we access it through this younger generation that's coming up. So 2026, I think we'll see the real sort of uplift in this.
2026.
Yeah.
Great.
You heard it here.
Let me translate that because I think it's amazing. I will put that year in my agenda to get ready for that. Vale, le pregunté a Joe cómo cree que el mundo del metaverso puede afectar a la manera con la que trabajamos o las empresas. Y nos ha dado un punto de vista muy interesante. Y dice que al final el hecho de poder tener tecnologías realmente inmersivas puede darnos un estado de flow que no existe ahora mismo como entendemos. Por ejemplo, si tenemos una videollamada con alguien en un Zoom, siempre hay un momento de hey, ¿qué tal? Micrófono, tal, estás silenciado, ¿qué tienes detrás? Qué bien. Hay una serie de small talk que se dice en inglés como para empezar, que realmente no es lo que tú harías en la vida real. Irías directamente con 5 microgestos, ya sabes lo que tienes que hacer y vas directamente ahí, ¿no? Entonces, estas tecnologías nos permitirían no tener que estar en el mismo sitio, pero seguir teniendo la misma experiencia en el mundo real. Por ejemplo, vas a un compañero de trabajo, le tocas el hombro, dices, tal, pim, pam, y en 10 segundos ya tienes algo resuelto que no tienes que agendar en la agenda una llamada, a ver cómo estás, tener que cortar tu estado de flow, de hacer una cosa para llamar a alguien y seguir, ¿no? Entonces, este es el punto de vista más interesante. Estos estados de flow y de colaboración. Por ejemplo, 2 músicos que entre ellos pueden crear música sin necesidad de estar en el mismo sitio, pero realmente igual, no haciendo una llamada. Porque sí, es un poco un sustitutivo, pero todos sabemos que no es lo mismo estar en persona que estar por online. Por ejemplo, hacer un congreso en directo no es lo mismo que estar en una llamada de Zoom, aunque seamos 60, 70 personas. Al final, dice que puede traer muchísima más productividad porque los trabajadores pueden estar en el sitio donde ellos se sienten más inspirados en lugar de estar pues, en una oficina y a partir de ahí pues, hacer un poquito su mejor trabajo. También, como decía Laura al principio, una cosa que puede traer el metaverso es crear experiencias más inmersivas para que las personas puedan relacionarse con el producto que van a comprar de manera real antes de comprarlo. Por ejemplo, un coche. Voy a realmente probar el coche, tocar el coche, ver qué hay en el coche, o un piso, o un hotel, puedo estar ahí antes de tomar la decisión sin tener que desplazarme. Y al final, bueno, pues que el metaverso es una revolución creativa, ya que si puedes verlo, puedes estar ahí, puedes tener muchísima creatividad. Un arquitecto que en vez de estar imaginándose, puede realmente estar en el sitio e imaginarse cómo quedaría esto o cómo quedaría lo otro, ¿no? Eso sería un avance creativo. Y hasta aquí lo que hemos comentado, que también ve que cada vez más las nuevas generaciones estarán más inmersas en esta tecnología y puede haber un salto cuántico, un salto realmente importante a partir del 2026. Es así como lo ve él. Thank you very much, Joe. I don't know if someone has any questions for Joe. Okay, Joanna.
I have so many questions, but maybe I will find you later. But yeah, thanks.
I can hear you.
Maybe I also need to shake it. How does it work? But I will take just my one question to start with. So I think for me it was very interesting when you said that you don't imagine that the metaverse experience necessarily is going to include the VR glasses or such, because I think a lot of people have like this Ready Player One image in their head when we talk about what the metaverse is. So I would just be curious to understand how you then vision sort of the entry happening. You mentioned, and I heard you when you said we'll have different devices around, but for me it's not necessarily difficult, but still like more challenging to envision what that actually would look like or mean if it's not the Ready Player One version.
Okay, when Meta came out and they said that they were changing their name to Meta, they have one of the biggest social networks in the world, and they implanted this vision that everyone would be using the Oculus to get into the metaverse-based platforms, and then once you get in there, you can basically consume content. The advancements, I mean, my world comes from projection mapping, so we were using the same games engines, but we were using them to change buildings and change our environments around us. And for me, that is the most simplistic and easy way to access a virtual world, is through a wall or an environment around you, without the need for technology on your body. When we start to see the ability for pixels to be pushed out to devices without the need for GPU computational power in those devices. I hope you can understand what I mean by that. When we start to see that happening, then that will create, and is going to create, a revolution in the way in which people can access metaverse-based platforms through glasses, through everyday sort of wearable objects. I was just with a bunch of kids just before this, ideating what they believed would be the way. And it seems we need to create lots of holograms that are floating around us. But you know, we don't know these technologies that are coming in the future, but we know that the ability to push those pixels to walls, to a pair of glasses, without the hindrance of being cut off from your environment, those things will come, I believe, and overwrite what we see with regards to VR. Magic Leap, I think, sort of touched on it originally with their plan of being able to look at a classroom and see a whale breaching in the middle of the gymnasium, right? When we start to look at the more inclusive and the community-based experience, as in I can go, oh my God, look over there, look, there's that thing, like tagged augmented reality. So assets, virtual assets that are tagged in locations, being able to be delivered to things like glasses or screens, then it's a multitude of different directions. And I think Meta really sort of set the die in the water with regards to how we perceive this change. A lot of people in this world first heard about it through that announcement of Facebook changing to Meta. And I think that was part of their game plan in changing their name to Meta, was for you to think that they were the creators of this experience. It's always going to be through screens. It's always going to be through devices. It's always going to be through your computers playing games. I don't think that's going to go anywhere soon. But I believe at some point there'll be a shift in the way in which this media is delivered to you. that won't disconnect you from your environment and the people around you. And when that happens, all of these industrial moves in games engines will flow directly into that, and that's when I believe it will be a mass user case. At the moment, I think there's only 500,000 Oculus goggles out there. You know, it's really small numbers. But when it becomes more inclusive, and obviously price is really sort of inherent in all of that. You know, you can't stick a GPU in a pair of glasses for less than, you know, a couple of $100. But when it becomes something that's affordable, then I believe we'll see a shift. We'll see a shift in very similar to the way in which we use mobile phones and have mobile phone contracts. We'll see a shift in that to sort of a more wider use case. But until then, we're fixed with, you know, what we're being told, but I don't believe that.
Thanks so much.
We have another question down there.
Thank you. Haré la pregunta en castellano para tener más precisión, si le dices, por favor. Es posible que sea necesario, está claro que habrá plataformas propietarias que llegarán a un acuerdo de protocolo mediante el Metaverse Forum Protocol o el que sea, ¿vale? Pero siempre serán propietarias. ¿Es posible que sea necesaria una plataforma de generación de servidores en 3 dimensiones, en código abierto, para que cualquier empresa desarrolladora o empresa pequeña pueda tener su espacio virtual en 3 dimensiones sin necesidad de estar en las grandes plataformas? Es decir, sería como el servidor de Apache, al cambio, como el servidor de Apache en web, lo que supone el servidor de Apache para la web, pero para entornos virtuales. Es decir, un desarrollo a gran escala y con mayor implicación de la comunidad de desarrolladores del proyecto Open Simulator, y no sé si conoces OpenSim, para posibilitar ese acceso a metaversos de cada compañía o de cada empresa, lo que sea, y que además esté estandarizado con el protocolo del acuerdo que lleguen entre Microsoft, Facebook, bueno, lo mismo que pasa con el protocolo IP, ¿no? O sea, que podemos viajar por la web. Pues lo mismo por los distintos metaversos, incluso con servidores de código abierto. No sé si ha quedado un poco, sé que es un poco extensa la pregunta, pero...
Voy a intentar, si ves que algo no está preciso, me lo dices.
Mi español es muy terrible.
Okay, let's try. So I think the main question he's asking is that he's concerned that there's going to be some private property platforms that allow virtual worlds, and he's asking if there should be some kind of open servers, like open source, where much coders can come and construct worlds that are of open use for people to not have the necessity to use those private platforms. And he was comparing it to Apache being that kind of open source space for the web, but something into the virtual world area, to be basically not to have to go through the funnel of private platforms that create all this.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and actually we've got a very interesting project based around that, actually, which is the ability for you to create your own platforms and your own virtual worlds using basically an open source code base, which is Unreal Engine. A lot of the people in this world work in an open source way, inherently, especially with the likes of Python and even co-developing on Unreal Engine. You can take Unreal Engine and break it apart and actually redevelop the system to be whatever you want it to be, and upload it onto the Git, and I can come into your Git and see what you've done and add to it and augment it and change it. So I believe open source is the way in which a lot of the governance of all of this is going to take place, especially when we start to look at Web3 and how Web3 is interacting with it. There's multitudes of projects that are working on that line of open source, co-governed experiences that people can take and redesign their own experience within that. In fact, there's a video and a project that we're working on called Decentralized Festival, which is a music festival in the UK. And the entire festival is built upon a decentralized open source platform. And the Metaverse platform, if do you want to play that video actually, I'll show you an example. We're working with Passage 3D, which is basically using vanilla Unreal Engine. You can go in there, you can augment your world, you can spin it up, and you can invite people into it. Yeah, so you just got an example here, and the way people are interacting is through their webcams. The webcams getting placed onto avatar pucks, we call them.
That's the paperwork for the new CEO.
You can turn the audio down, actually, just turn the audio down. But, yeah, you can play it. But
it has to be the current CEO, that's you, and it has to be done today.
And if it isn't?
Then?
So, yeah, here we see your webcam attached to a hockey puck. They're embedded within the game. That game engine, that level, the instance in Unreal can be anything that you want to design and create. And with this platform as well, with Decentralized Festival, we're creating a music festival as well as the game simultaneously happening. So people can attend the festival, and the screens of the festival will not only be camera inputs, as in people looking to the festival and looking at windows into the experience, but vice versa. People at the festival will be able to see people in virtual world on the other side. Now, outside of that, when we start to look at Web3 and different blockchains sitting in the back end and doing all of the auditing of the passing, for example, you're swapping a t-shirt, I'm buying an NFT off you, all of that is open source and completely decentralized, so no one's in control of it, everyone can see what's happening. When that is overlaid on virtual world experiences, you spin up your virtual world, you create it, you put it online, you start interacting with it. And the idea is that multiple of these worlds will be simultaneously happening, which means that you as the user, if you're using the same protocol for the Web3 and also the same games engine for the 3D environment, you'll be able to walk between these worlds and dip into different collaborative experiences. These can host up to 20,000 people simultaneously, and it's using a webcam, so you're not disconnected, but it's got spatial audio around it as well. And so these are some of the projects that are coming out, but they're all completely open source. You can jump in and re-engineer what there is in the back, and I can take what you've created and change it. There's stuff to do with IP and intellectual property that comes into that when you're taking a piece of code. I think probably everyone knows about Bill Gates and how Windows was formed. He took open source platform and basically made it a licensed software. But with the expansion of this stuff happening, and especially with the likes and the working processes of the companies like Epic Games, the ability for people to dive in, take that software, change it to something that they want to create, host it, put it up online and invite people into it. That's already happening now. We've seen the early stages of it happening like this, where it's environments that people are having conversations in, they're moving around, they're jumping, they're maneuvering themselves, they're going, I don't want to be part of this conversation anymore. But it's all open source at the back. And you can go onto the Git and look at all of the software that's been written for the likes of Epic Games, or even in the blockchain as well. With the likes of different blockchain protocols, you can create your own chain based upon a Cosmos chain very, very quickly and easily. I hope I answered your question.
¿Sí? Bueno, básicamente decía que sí, que existe y que hay muchos proyectos que ya están funcionando en open source por detrás. All right, I think we're going to have time to chat with you. Are you going to stay during the day in the conference? Or?
Yes, I'll be around for a few hours.
Great.
Hang out.
So people can connect with you around the day, more or less?
Yeah, I'll be around. Come
Great.
and say hello.
So if you have any other questions, we're going to have Joe around. I want to really thank you for your input here. That was very, very inspiring. And yes, please, Joseph.